Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes and BlueBearFlutes.com, where you'll find the latest and greatest Native American flutes and drone flutes from around the world. Anyway, today's video is on a repair job that I've been asked to do. I say I've been asked to do it, but technically I offered to do the repair job. It was someone I seen on the Native American Flute Reddit, which is a really nice Reddit where people don't normally fight and argue too awful much, or at least not much anyway. I know a lot of you probably kind of cringe when you hear the word Reddit, and a lot of people do. I can't say that I don't, but the Native American Flute Reddit, the community that's slowly been developing on there, has been one that typically everybody gets along okay, and if they don't get along, then they get banned. So anyway, that's where I found this person asking for help with some problems they were having with this drone flute that they purchased on some online website, and I've covered up this little symbol that's right here because it may identify the flute maker. There's also the maker's name right here. This says F sharp 432 Hertz, and there's a couple of dots on top and bottom for decoration. There's some flowers here that are on these various fingerings. It's made out of red cedar. It is a standard drone with three note holes on this other side on the drone chamber, so that when you play, you can unplug one of those one of those note holes, because you can't actually play that fingering over there. If you can, I would really love to know if you could do that. That's amazing. But a lot of people were making drones like this today, where you keep a plug covering one hole or the other throughout the duration of your playing, or while you're playing, maybe you can unplug and plug it back in without breaking up the fluidity of the sound. But our drones, as you know, we only have like one finger hole in the back because it's a place where your thumb actually will fit. On our two drones that are really too large for that to be convenient, I do put a plug in it, but I can play those two thumb holes. They're just kind of really a stretch for me. I know there's a lot of other people out there who can play them without as much difficulty as I do with my semi-arthritic fingers. So anyway, the person that I had read their Reddit comments about this drone, their biggest complaints were the bottom couple of fingers are airy sounding. And they are a little airy sounding, but my biggest concern with the drone is its intonation. And to me, that's just like the prize. It's the most important part of a flute, is its intonation. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I know who this flute maker is. I called him and talked to him. We had an excellent conversation. I commended him. I told him the situation. Of course, he knows already from the buyer who's had his complaints. I told him that, I commend him on, the quality instrument he created. It is a pretty good quality drone. There's some things that I'm not really in tune with on it, all in all, it's a pretty good quality drone. He had mentioned that he purchased my book and that he used to try to use my schematics. And you'll notice this is an F sharp drone. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. It's not really important, but it's an F sharp 432. 432. And I'm not picking on the maker either, by the way. It's just all of you people that have to have 432. Oh yeah, I'm not picking on you either, as long as you're still watching. But anyway, he said that he used to try to use my fingering patterns, but they didn't work for him. And I explained to him, I said, did you try making the sound hole the size that my book describes that you would make the sound hole as? And he said no. He said, I didn't realize it gave me the size for the sound hole. And that's probably because he didn't read that little part of the blurb above my schematics, that these tones only work, these fingerings only work to make these tones if the sound hole is this size, and then of course you'll have to cut the bottom note to tune. So a lot of people miss that kind of thing. I'm going to play it for you. I'm going to let you hear what these fingerings sound like. Once again, not putting down the flute maker, but I'm going to show you how it is that you are to play these. And that's one of my beefs with anybody's flutes that you have extra fingerings on, that you think you want these extra fingerings. Those extra fingerings sell. I'm going to tell you right now, they sell like crazy. If I were to drill 6 holes on each side of my flutes, they would sell like hotcakes. But whoever gets it eventually will be scratching their head, and I would hope that they would hold me accountable for making a flute that they couldn't play those extra 6 holes on that other side for. You know, it's just, it's going to take a lot of thinking on your parts. And any of you who have a drone like this that have all these countless extra fingerings on it, and you've been scratching your head wondering why it is that you bought it, you know, maybe you've got it already or figured it out, but some people maybe not. Anyway, let's play this. I'm going to play the flute side first. Now you can hear a little bit of the airy. Maybe if I get just a little closer to this camera. Okay, so you can hear the airy. Maybe that would bother you enough that you would want to exchange the drone or talk to the maker or have another maker work on it or try to do it yourself, which is what the avenue this gentleman was originally going to go, was doing it himself. And to me, my biggest concern is those last 2 notes. And keep in mind too, I deplore modern 6-hole Native American flutes where you have to keep this fingering covered all the time. That note is also out of tune. I was going to wait before I added my piece of blue tape to it as well, but I wanted to let you hear what it sounds like. Just the intonation, if you'll focus on that. Pretty good. Not too bad. And so when I called the flute maker, my question to him was, is this supposed to be a minor pentatonic flute, and am I supposed to keep my 3rd fingering covered all the time to make it play that way? And he said yes. I asked him this because if it was supposed to be, and there again, I could even guess and tell you it's not, but if it were supposed to be in one of these new Arabic scales that so many of you have asked me to make Native American flutes in, or some other type of quote-unquote diatonic scale that, you know, so many have asked me to make it in, or if it's supposed to be a major flute scale that I've had in the last 2 weeks, somebody who's a professional flute player asked me to make them a Native American flute in a major scale. And I had a long talk with him. I said, look, you know, there's a guy in South Florida that says he's the father of the Native American flute scale, and that he's the reason that we think that they should be minor pentatonic, which is 10,000% laughable. Not laughing at you, Michael, but I am. I'm not putting you down. That's what I meant to say. I might be laughing. Anyway, I can show you historic flutes design that play minor pentatonic. I'm sorry if the people that wrote the book Ben Hunt Guide on Indian Arts and Crafts didn't realize that's how they were supposed to be made or played or whatever, but that's just, you know, that's how it is. You shouldn't have to keep this hole covered. I do have a 6-hole flute laying around here, but I'm not going to grab it out and play it. If you want to see what a 6-hole flute's supposed to sound like, go watch one of my other traditional 6-hole flute videos. Or watch the video that I proved, you know, I made one in the modern design and one in the old design, and you can kind of see the difference. But maybe I'll put those in the description. I'll put a link to those in the description so you can watch some of those. Anyway, if we cover this hole up like you're supposed to, these 2 notes are still flat on this particular flute. Now, I'll play that note for you so you can hear what it sounds like. It's still off. So, let's pretend that hole doesn't exist. And I'm just going to cover it up with a piece of tape. Any of you that own a 6-hole flute that think you need to graduate to learn how to play that, or that eventually you'll get good enough to play whatever, you know, love y'all, but no. Anyway, this is how, plug that, or you cover some little plug back in there. So, those notes are flat. We're going to look at the tuner in a second, but before we do that, let's hear what this thing sounds like as a drone. Both the bottom notes are in tune, by the way, very well, I'd say. See? One other thing too, and I don't want to keep complaining about this. Like I said, the flute maker did a good job, but the design of this mouthpiece causes you to want to put part of it in your mouth. See how my lip kind of overhangs that right there? That also causes flutes to wet out faster than putting your lips against the hole and playing, because when you put something in your mouth, it triggers a salivary reaction, and you just start salivating, the moisture builds up, and eventually it builds up in your flute. So I have to make sure I'm careful with how much time I play on this thing to make sure you guys can enjoy what it's supposed to sound like. And then, somehow while you're playing, see, that note is in tune, like it should be, which is good. And then, you've got that. And a lot of you are thinking, well, that sounds really cool. That would be something I'd like to do. And it does sound really cool in theory until you start trying to play the flute. You can't cover those holes up. And because your hand is not designed, and even if you play quote unquote left hand down, it's not going to be a comfortable fix there for you. So those are my complaints with the drone. Otherwise, the airy sound is a little bit of a problem. I'm going to address those right now, and I'm going to show you the intonation, and then we'll go and see what it's going to take to get this guy fixed up and working so that it's not displeasing to their customer or to the maker. So first off, we'll start with the reason why it is that the drone didn't play with my fingering pattern, because of the width of the sound hole. That's part of the problem. Now, the depth of the sound hole is great, in my opinion. This is an F-sharp drone. The inside diameter is about 7/8 of an inch. I don't have to look that up or use my caliper on it. I can tell by looking at it because I've got a stack of G drones over here, which are the same inside diameter as this one, and I've been making them all day long. So this is definitely the right inside diameter, which is great. The spacing, like I say, doesn't follow my pattern, but it doesn't have to follow my pattern. There's a lot of other patterns. I will tell you, I'm struggling to keep these fingerings covered, but that's because this is one of the other top-end flute makers' pattern who I don't go along with their designs. But more power to them. If you'll notice, though, like I say, my fingerings are much closer together, and even down here, substantially closer together than they are on this other one. Like I said, he's following some other flute makers' patterns on those fingerings because he's got the width of the sound holes quite spaced there. One other thing that I will tell you about that is a little bit of a difficulty, I don't know if it came to the buyer this way or not, but this block moves a lot like this, and the more you move it, the looser it gets, and the more loose it gets, the airier it's going to sound. And you know, it'll actually, if you have it up here and you're holding it and you let go of it, it'll slide down. So that's another problem. I don't know if the flute maker did this differently or not, because sometimes when somebody sends you a flute that somebody else made, they may have already untied the leather straps and whatnot. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. The problem is when you tie this leather here, if you'll watch that right there, I'm going to let go of it. Now watch. See how it starts to move? And as I tie this one, watch it. I'm going to let go of it, and it moves back. If it were me, I would keep it tight. And once again, the flute maker may have done this. I would keep it tight, and while it's tight, I would wrap and put a knot around it right here to keep that knot from sliding. That would help out an awful lot. I don't think that's the problem with this flute. I can see a lot of these problems just by looking at it. So, and like I say, I'm not putting the flute maker down. He did a good job in my opinion. He's got some room for improvement, but you know, we all do. So making sure that this block is lined up. I'm going to try it now and see if it sounds any different. Still quite airy, excuse me, and these two notes are still incredibly flat. So that's not the problem. I'm pretty confident that the problem is one of my massive opinions here, and I'm going to show you. This width is completely unnecessary. Like I said, a lot of these big-time flute making companies today use wider sound holes because they believe it makes it sound louder, and then they make it short right here. If this were supposed to sound like a Native American flute, and historic Native American flutes that have been discovered didn't have this wide sound hole in them, then you would think that if you made it with a wide sound hole, it would not sound like a historic Native American flute, and that's true. Historic Native American flutes may have sounded a little bit airy, but I would not ever put this wide sound hole in it. Like I said, hundreds of thousands of people in the world today have flutes with these wide sound holes in them because it's become a popular idea. The biggest problem that I have with this particular flute is that the track is deep in places and shallow in places. I can run my finger across it and feel that. It actually, the track bellows down into the flute like that. It kind of ramps in the wrong direction. And that's probably 90% of the sound airiness. The other problem is, if you look right here, the track doesn't extend to the edge of the sound hole. That's a minor problem. That might be like 1% of the problem. And then probably the other 9% is the fact that this is a round sound hole that comes out at an angle right here that causes a mass of air to flow this way, and as it turbulences up, these bits of air that are trying to pass this way get sucked into the turbulence. Now that's going a little bit on the in-depth side of things, but if we basically squared the sound hole up a little bit and just put the same bevel that he's got on the edge of the track going into the flute, then it should actually clear up a lot of the rest of the sound quality. So another problem that I've got going on with this one is that this deep area right here where it's been burned a little too much with a burning tool, this deep area might need to be filled in, and I'm probably going to go back and fill that in and then go back and use my CNC machine as a milling machine, which is what I use it for 90% of the time. I'm going to go back and I'm going to CNC it down so that they're the same depth and thickness, you know, all the way, and also the same width as the sound hole. Then I'm also going to square up this hole back here as best I can, because I don't want to cut into it too much back here because it's probably getting close to the edge of where the block can cover. And then the other pet peeve that I have that I've got to tell you all about, and this one is from the buyer. And I don't want to put the buyer down by any means. I mean, I offered to do this for free if he had let me make a video out of it. And of course, obscuring the flute maker's marks and name and anything else so that nobody knew who it was that made this. Because I don't want any of you to think you shouldn't buy from this guy. Like I said, he's a good quality flute. If I wasn't a flute maker for 38 years now and made, you know, gosh, made so many flutes. If it wasn't for that, I would have bought one from him. This is a good flute. Just some things aren't the way that I agree with, but you know, that's because of experience, not because of being a first-time flute player. I'm not going to put these other plugs in either because I'm not focused on that drum chamber right now. But I do want to share with you the one important thing that I talked to the buyer about who sent this to me. He said, "Is it still going to be 432 when you send it back to me?" And I said, facetiously, forgive me, buyer watching this right now, and everybody else who believes in 432 as their magical savior of life as we know it while the world is crumbling around us. 432 Hertz is loosely based on what we call a Schumann resonance frequency. Dr. or Professor Schumann, S-C-H-U-M-A-N, maybe another N, I forget, I can't remember. You can wiki him and read what he's got going on in life. He studied tones that were in our atmosphere, and he found like 13 tones. The lowest of these 13 tones was 7.8 Hertz. And so some people got together, if I made a flute in the lowest tone Hertz frequency, then that would be the frequency of the earth, because that lowest tone must be the frequency of the earth. When Dr. Schumann says all of these frequencies are found in the earth, or not even in the earth, they're actually found in the atmosphere. They're not found in the earth. Dirt vibrates at a certain frequency. It really does. I mean, the carbon and silica and quartz and every other bit of junk that's in the dirt vibrates at a certain frequency. Actually, a bunch of different frequencies. I'm made out of carbon and water and a little bit of iron and some zinc and 2 or 3 other things, puppy dog's tails, and I can't remember how the nursery rhyme goes, but I'm made out of all that junk. So my body vibrates with all these different tones and frequencies. Everything vibrates at different tones and frequencies. Those tones and frequencies are actually what makes us and keeps our parts from flying away from each other and keeps us together. So we all have frequencies, and 7.8 hertz is not the frequency of that barking dog. It's not the frequency of the dirt. It's not the frequency of the air, the actual air molecule itself. It's not that frequency. It's not the frequency of the magnetosphere that holds the ionosphere into place that Dr. Schumann was studying. It's not the frequency of any of that. It is the frequency that occurs when lightning strikes on the opposite end of the planet from where Dr. Schumann was studying. When lightning strikes over there in the ocean and vibrates on this giant fishbowl that makes up the planet that's holding all of our junk together in here so we don't fly out like it would happen if we were on Mars, like it used to. Anyway, and then it vibrates and it bounces throughout all of the ionosphere, which is the solid part that the magnetosphere is holding together. And then he studied it and picked it up wherever he picked it up on his observatory. That's how that happened. That was a combination of occurrences that made that happen. And that was 7.8 hertz. That's not the other 12 frequencies that he heard. There's 12 others, okay? It's not those other frequencies. Then on top of it, the people who decided to do this, and please follow me, if you get confused, go back and listen to this again, because I'm not out of my mind. I haven't been drinking, and I'm not using any drugs. This is straight up science and physics of how people have come up with this 432 hertz phenomenon. I didn't say crap, I said phenomenon. And then they take that 7.8 hertz and they round it up to 8 hertz. And then they take 8 hertz 6 octaves north. They jump it up 6 octaves. They go 8 hertz, and then they multiply it by a whole scale, and then they go to that one, and then they go to the next one, and the next one, and eventually they get to 432 from 8 hertz. 8 hertz is nowhere in the Schumann frequency range. It's not right. It ain't there. And it's because they rounded the number off from 7.8 to 8, not thinking it would make a difference. But I do know from doing the math and checking the numbers when I really felt like I needed to research this and find out if there was something to it, that 7.8 hertz actually equals 422.6, I think it is. And there's a bunch of other trailing numbers at the end of that, so I'm actually rounding that number up. So 422 is actually 6 octaves north of 7.8 hertz. And the difference between 422 hertz and 432 hertz is enough to make a big difference. And then 440 on top of it, you know, the whole reason that we have 440 could be a conspiracy, and maybe the governments are trying to use it to kill you and make some kind of disorderly harmony with everything as it is. But that dog barking down there, I've got pretty good hearing, and I can tell that he's barking at a frequency that if I were to do the math on it, it would equal about 3.2 hertz if we went down 6 octaves, or it's going to be somewhere near around 416 or 418 hertz. I can hear that. I know that. So what do we decide is the God note, the most important note in the world, the most, you know, we really shouldn't have to have this conversation, but this is the world we live in. Anyway, so the guy asked me, would it still be 432 hertz? And I said, yes, I can promise you it'll still be 432 hertz if you'll tell me which note in that scale is 432. Now, this is an easy one. So many of you are blurting out right now. Well, the 4 of you that are still watching the video, that aren't bored to death, that are still watching the video, realize that 432 is the note A, right? 440 is a note A. 422 is the note A. They're all really flat compared to 440, but it's the note A. And he couldn't answer that question. And he's like, but I want it 432. And that's because, and this is the most important part of this conversation, is that most people have no idea what 432 means or what it's about or why it has to do with anything. And yes, the flute is tuned on a sliding scale of 432, but this one's not really. This is where we're going to watch this tuner here, and I need you to pay really close attention. Oh, by the way, I didn't get into my rant about the bag. I love this bag. This thing's amazing. I talked to my wife about it for 20 minutes before we started making this video. So my tuner is set to 432 if A were 432. I'm going to play the notes on the flute chamber, which is in tone exactly with the drone chamber. There, those notes are in tone, so I'm not gonna bother you with that part. Let's just focus on the flute chamber. Now, it looks like it's sharp. It's registering way over here, but honestly, this is correct because it's about 92 degrees in my shop right now, which is actually quite warm. It'll make your flute go very sharp, and this is how I tune. I turn off all of the machines in the shop, and we listen to this, and it shows that it's sharp by about, it's about 45 cents, and that's correct at this temperature. That is 432. But what we need everything else to show you is the note, and it needs to be at that same frequency. This black dot right here on this tuner, and if they're all at that frequency, then we would have a whole flute at 432 hertz, sliding scale, which if you watch the numbers, if you watch the letters there, I mean, you'll notice that they're the right letters for an F sharp scale. Those first three notes start off at exactly 432 hertz for that low F sharp, and then the next note is actually a bit flat. The next note following it is substantially flat, and then finally when I get the last two notes, they're way over here, about 10 or 15 cents flat at 432 at 92 degrees in my shop, which is incredibly flat for the scale. I'm going to show you what those need to be in just a moment when we retune it, but we won't retune it until I fix the sound hole and track areas, which you're not going to have to watch because it's easy peasy stuff I've got videos on. So your last F sharp there is about 45 cents flat because it's registering right on the money compared to its big brother at the bottom, which is registering over here, which is correct for 92 degrees in the shop. So I'm going to take this thing down. I'm going to fix the track. I'm going to go back and redo the track in it so you can see what that looks like. And then I believe we're going to be a lot better off. I'm also going to seal the inside of it because one thing I can tell you, this is red cedar. If you can see, I don't know if you can see those cracks in the flute there. Those cracks are letting small micro amounts of air out, and that will change the intonation. So after I do this, I'm going to wind up going back and retuning it. What I would really like to do is reshape the size, the width of those holes. That would make an incredibly clear tone. But I'm going to keep it this way because, yes, you can make a flute that's a clear tone that way, but I've got countless reasons that I can tell you why it's not the best solution. Even though the two largest flute making companies in the world today do that, and then the fourth one does too over in Australia, if he's still in business. I know he was popping out some flutes there for a while, but they do use those wide sound holes, which isn't historically accurate. And, you know, of course, historically accurate, you know, we're talking an F sharp flute, so it doesn't have to be completely historically accurate. But if you want it to sound like a Native American flute, it won't be a major scale, it won't be an Arabic scale, it won't be completely crystal clear like a tin whistle or a silver flute. It has to have some Native American to it for it to be, even as this flute maker calls it, because he's not a Native American style flute. So I'm gonna go do this. Y'all take a look at it in a second, and hopefully I've got it to where this customer will be pleased with it. Okay, so we're back. I finished it. It was a really easy fix. I cannot express to you enough. My biggest concern, once again, it could have stayed airy all day long, but I had to have these notes in tune. When I talked to the flute maker about those notes and the intonation, he says that I'm trying to remember how he put it. I don't want to misquote him. Something to the extent of he doesn't do it by ear, but he kind of follows like a basic pentatonic scale or something of that nature. Anyway, to each his own. But in the case of this one, like I say, I felt like it would sound better if it was minor pentatonic instead, which is pretty much what it was, but the last couple of notes were a little flat. One was kind of weird sharp, and then the other ones were flat. Anyway, what I have done here, I'm going to show you. I went back in The first thing I did here was fill this in with glue and sawdust, and I let it dry really good. If you'll notice, the edges are a lot more square, and if you'll also notice, you can see there's discoloration right here and right here, and that's because that is glue and sawdust in there, because there was a deep spot. Now when I put it in my CNC machine, I kept it at the same level and went straight on back and cleaned that up so that they're the same depth all the way across. Something else that I didn't critique in the beginning, I really should have let you know, was that because of the differences in depths of these two tracks, the drone chamber was louder than the flute chamber, which made it overpowering. And I should have given you a demonstration of that so you could hear it, because I heard it right off. But anyway, here nor there. Squared up the holes a little bit. I put kind of a slant on them and tried to erase as much of that round part of the hole there as I could so that we didn't create any odd turbulences coming out. And then just really quick, I mean, I didn't, as you can tell, it's not black. I didn't really burn it a whole lot. I just kind of did enough to clean up any of the scar tissue that my CNC machine bit left on it, because honestly, the bit needs to be replaced. We'll use these bits until the very last minute, and it left some burr. But I also went underneath of each of these. As you can tell, it's a little blackened right there with that same track tool, just like I do in my other videos. He had done a good job, the flute maker did already, but it was just a little bit uneven, just like the track there itself was a little bit uneven and kind of wavy, if you would. And that's why there's a spot here, fill, and spot there, fill. And then, like I said, they're straight across. The sound difference, I've got to tell you, is night and day from what it was. So the customer should be happy, and the maker should be happy. And because I'm not letting it go out of here without being more minor pentatonic sounding as it should be, I'm happier. It's still got that extra fingering, which I'm not going to mess with. One other thing I'm going to do too, that really should have been done at some point in this thing's life, if not in the beginning and the ending, is I'm going to tighten these pieces of leather, if I can get them untangled. I'm going to tighten them up and tie a better knot on it so it's nice and flat and solid. Between the block and the flute, there is a little bit of a warp also, but it's not nearly enough to be a problem. And it doesn't affect the sound now. Let's see. And then, as per my wife's suggestion, I'm going to take the opportunity to show y'all the difference between my drone's fingerings here and this drone's fingerings. And we'll see if we can't make a nice comparison contrast here. Hopefully this thing is going to stay nice and tight on the way to the customer. So he's not paying me anything to do this job. I felt so bad for him. He was asking anybody that would listen on the Native American Flute Reddit, is there anything I can do here to help it? And some people spurted out some ideas that they had, and some of them have made a flute or two, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them didn't make 10G drones today. That's for one of my wholesale customers. Oh my gosh, I'm making these flutes every day. My wife felt bad today because she only made about 2 dozen. She's back there grimacing because she doesn't believe she made 2 dozen. I feel like she probably made at least 1 dozen, but we had a lot of it's Monday. I mean, this is what happens on Monday at Blue Bear Flutes. Okay, so it's tied back on. The sound, the edges here, this is so important, and the buyer, please pay attention to this. The edge of this block here is right about 2 millimeters behind the edge of this sound hole, okay? And that makes a world of difference. Something else that's important here while I've got you up close is lining this thing up, because it's got these supposed wind tracks on the sides of it. There's a flute maker, I don't know if he's even still making flutes, but he had come up with this wind track design that was going to stop the wind from damaging the sound of the flute while you're playing, which is whatever. But were there historically flutes like that? There was one that I know of that had like a long cover around the sides of it, and probably because he lived on the plain somewhere and felt like it, had caused some wind problems. But any of you that wonder why Kokopelli looks like he does, it's because that's the position you have to get into to keep the wind from messing your flute up when you're playing. Anyway, hopefully that makes good sense there to a lot of you. I say a lot of you, the 2 of you that are still watching. Let's see. So, in the track difference here, in this flute and my flute, I'm going to show you the sound holes and tracks on it as well, so that you can kind of see what they look like. Let me go ahead and take that drone you've got there. So this one's not finished yet because we stain all of our poplar drones. It helps to make them look nice and finish them up a little bit. We use a natural stain. I've used 2 different natural stains through the years. I've got a 3rd one I'm going to be trying on Thursday. Hopefully it'll be a good quality one. But if you'll notice, the track in the sound hole substantially different in size. These 2 flutes may as well be the same tone. I mean, it's a G and an F sharp, even though it is an F sharp at 432 Hertz. But let me show you the difference in the size of the fingerings and the spacing of the fingerings there. My F sharp pattern and this is a G here, by the way. If you'll notice, the holes are in the same place. You can kind of see how it lines up there. They're in the same place. But if you'll notice up here at the top, there's a distance that's different there. And that's a big difference. If we want to slide it down here, that would be where it would be for the F sharp rather than the G. But what's important to see is that the fingerings are the exact same. My G flute, my F sharp flute fingerings are really close to the same. Compared to this guy, these 2 are closer together, these 2 are closer together, and then these 3 are all closer to one another. It makes a big difference when you hold the flute. It's so much easier to play. And like I said, the fact that the sound hole and the tracks are the same width, they're square holes instead of rectangular, all that makes a world of difference. But this is what you've been waiting for, was what it sounds like, right? I'm going to play the flute side. Get a little closer to the camera, if y'all forgive having to look at my ugly mug. Now the wind, as I've been talking about it, is messing up the sound of the flute while I'm playing, but and for the buyer, one other thing I wanted you to see was that A note is still 432, so take a look at the A. Now the temperature has dropped a little bit. It's about 88, 89 degrees in here right now because we're getting closer to dark. But and if you notice, those top 2 notes are so much more in harmony and in line with the intonation of the bottom 3 notes. That's how it's supposed to sound. It's supposed to end on a bright tone instead of, which is kind of flat, which is the notes it was. So let me play the other side so that the flute buyer can hear that it's in tune still. If I unplug this one, in tune, in tune, and then finally the last one. My mouth wasn't right. And my dad used to say, "You're not holding your mouth right." I was losing breath too at the last. So, anyway. So, hopefully, we've taken it from what the customer would have described as about a 6 to somewhere between a 10 and an 11. And like I say, very little work on my part to do this. The flute maker did a great job. I can't tell you that enough. There are some things that we talked about that I redid that made the world of difference on this particular flute. And mostly it is not allowing there to be any kind of dips or really weird shapes inside of the track. That's so important. And then having it in tune is so important. If you think that 432 Hertz is important, there's only one note on this flute that's 432. That's the note A. The rest of the notes are not 432, nor are they Schumann resonance frequencies. They're on a sliding scale based on the Pythagorean, design of notes today. And I mean, it's just, there's so much to think about that 432 isn't. If you wanted to play a flute in 432, I made a video about that, by the way. Maybe we can put that one in the description too. Make sure we remember to stick that one 432 flute in the video, because all it plays is that's the note that it plays all day long. There's no fingerings because that's 432. That's me playing a 432 song. Hopefully some of you are laughing. Anyway, the 1 or 1.3 of you that are left. Anyway, hopefully you watched this video all the way through. You enjoyed it, had some kind of kicks out of my comedy, because at least I did. And if you get a chance, go back and check those other videos out, especially the ones about the 6-hole flutes, so that you know why it is that note is in the wrong place. Anyway, I hope that this has helped you all. I hope it's helped the Reddit community a little bit. I'm going to post this video there as well so that they can all share and enjoy and have a good time critiquing my skills. And because you know how Reddit is. Although I could mod these people. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. Flute buyer, I hope that you've enjoyed my minor criticisms, and maybe you'll rethink the whole 432 Hertz thing and decide whether or not that really means anything, because it doesn't. And Flute Maker, it was great talking to you the other day. I really appreciate your time. Keep up the flute making. We all have a lot, like I told you on the phone, we all have a lot of growing to do and a lot of places to go. I appreciate you being so polite with me on the phone. That was really great. I wish I could say your name for that reason. But you were great, and it's a good flute. It really is. So y'all take care. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching our videos. Check out the rest of them. Don't forget to check us out on TikTok and Instagram. And once again, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for Blue Bear Flutes and bluebearflutes.com. See you again very soon.